February 12, 1945. 0600 hours. The island of Iwo Jima. The heavy fog rolls across the jagged cliffs as American Marines cautiously move through the remains of a jungle long decimated by war. Their boots crunch over sand, the air thick with the scent of salt and gunpowder. And there, half buried in the sand, is a forgotten relic. A Japanese Zero fighter, abandoned in haste, its sleek form still untouched by the fury of modern warfare. But as the Marines approach, they pause, stunned by the unexpected sight before them. The Zero is stripped of something vital, its armor protection, absent as if it had never existed. In a battlefield where survival hinges on every advantage, why would a fighter, renowned for its agility, be left so vulnerable? The Marines approach the fighter cautiously, their boots crunching over the debris of the battlefield. One of them kneels down to inspect the aircraft, his fingers brushing the metal. It's a moment of silence before the discovery. A cold sweat breaks out on his forehead as he notices the absence of armor. Iwo Jima, 1945. The American military's push through the Pacific has reached a climax. The battle is fierce, and every plane, every soldier is crucial. Yet this aircraft, a Japanese Zero fighter, stands as a symbol of something deeper, an enigma hidden in plain sight. What was it doing there? Why was it abandoned? Why was it left exposed? This was no ordinary warplane. This was a machine designed for one purpose: to survive long enough to defeat its enemy. Yet here it lay, defeated in a way no one expected. The Zero fighter, one of the most feared aircraft of World War II, had earned its place in history with its unmatched speed and agility. But what the Marines uncovered that day was far more than just an old relic. It was a question mark in the story of the Pacific War. Why, at the peak of its dominance, did Japan abandon the Zero's most crucial feature? Armor, the very protection that had kept pilots alive in countless dogfights, was missing. Was it a mistake, or was there something else at play? To understand this, we must look deeper into the strategic decisions made by the Japanese military during this final phase of the war. As we unravel the mystery behind the missing armor, we discover a paradox. In their desperate attempt to outmaneuver the Allies, the Japanese made a fatal flaw. In an effort to maximize speed and agility, they overlooked a basic principle of combat: protection. The fighter was faster, but it was not invulnerable. The Marines' discovery was more than just a relic of war. It was a sobering reminder of the high stakes of battle and the mistakes that can be made when survival becomes an afterthought. The discovery of the missing armor was not just a piece of history, it was a turning point. The Zero fighter, a symbol of Japan's aerial dominance, had a hidden story of vulnerability. The plane's design had been a product of desperation and flawed strategy. This wasn't just a plane that had been left to rust. It was a symbol of a war that was unraveling, of a country on the brink of defeat, and of a fatal oversight that cost many lives. The revelation of the Zero's missing armor wasn't just an accident or a piece of forgotten history. It was part of a larger narrative about the consequences of cutting corners in the face of war. The Japanese Zero was a plane that was meant to be a tool of superiority, but without the protection it needed, it was ultimately rendered ineffective. The discovery was a chilling reminder of how even the best strategies can crumble when the fundamentals are ignored. February 12, 1945. 0600 hours. Iwo Jima. The Zero fighter still rests in the sand, its armorless frame a silent testament to the mistakes of a war-torn world. As the Marines move on, their steps fade into the history of a battle that marked the end of an era. But the question lingers in the air. Could one missing piece have changed the course of the war? Could this abandoned fighter have made the difference? As the Marines gather around the abandoned Zero, the sounds of the battlefield fade into the background, replaced by the sharp hiss of air escaping from the plane's ruptured fuel lines. The fighter's once vibrant paint is chipped and faded, but the bare metal beneath it gleams in the early morning light. Sergeant Howard kneels down, his gloved hand hovering over the aircraft's fuselage. His fingers brush lightly against the exposed, rusted areas where the armor should have been. The cold, lifeless metal seems to speak volumes. He runs his hand along the surface as if searching for an answer, for a sign of something that was lost. Sergeant Howard's voice trembles slightly as he speaks. Why would they leave it like this? In a place like this, against enemies like us? No armor? This doesn't make sense. Iwo Jima, a strategic outpost in the Pacific, was one of the most pivotal islands during the final push in World War II. The American Marines had landed here with one purpose: to capture it and establish a base for the impending invasion of Japan. With the island's airfield in Allied hands, the Japanese could no longer defend their own skies. Yet, amidst the chaos of battle, with bullets whizzing overhead and bombs exploding around them, a lone fighter remained on the beach, its design seemingly a relic of the past. The question wasn't just about why it was abandoned, but also about how the entire Japanese air strategy had faltered in these final months. The once feared Zero fighter was no longer the agile, near-invincible machine it had been when it first struck fear into the hearts of American pilots. As the Marines processed what they saw before them, they couldn't have known just how much this single discovery would tell them about the nature of warfare in its final stages. The Japanese Zero fighter, famed for its lightweight design and maneuverability, had dominated the skies over the Pacific for years. Its agility had been its greatest strength, a fighter that could outmaneuver most opponents, gaining the upper hand in dogfights. But the absence of armor represented a fundamental flaw in the Japanese military's approach. In their desperate attempts to compete with the growing American forces, they had ignored a critical component of warfare: protection. The absence of armor wasn't just an oversight, it was a reflection of the larger mistakes the Japanese Empire made during the war. The Zero's design was a symbol of Japan's shifting priorities: speed over defense, agility over durability. As the war dragged on, Japan's ability to produce aircraft in large numbers dwindled. They were running out of resources, and their strategic errors became more apparent as the Allies gained ground. The Marines' discovery wasn't just about a missing component of a fighter plane. It was a larger commentary on Japan's military collapse, a failure to adapt to the harsh realities of war. The absence of armor on the Zero was the result of a decision that echoed Japan's desperation in those final months of the war. They had placed their bets on speed and precision, overlooking the importance of survival. And yet, the irony of this decision lies not in its immediate consequences, but in the greater lesson it provides. Speed and agility might win a battle, but they do not guarantee survival. In the quest for domination, the Japanese overlooked the most basic element of war: the need to protect what you hold dear. The Marines, facing an enemy who had once been so formidable, now saw a different side of war. It was no longer about fighting for territory or superiority. It was about the cost of failure, the price of strategic missteps. And in that moment, as they stood around the abandoned Zero fighter, they realized that this was not just a war of machines, but of minds, a war where every decision, no matter how small, could tip the scales of history. The Marines, having finished their inspection, stepped back, eyes fixed on the fighter. The sheer vulnerability of the plane in front of them, a symbol of Japan's once mighty Air Force, begins to set in. Sergeant Howard stands tall, his face etched with exhaustion and disbelief. His fingers, still smeared with dirt from the fighter, rub across his brow. This was it, he murmurs. This was what they were fighting for. A fighter that couldn't even protect its pilot. In the span of a few short months, the Japanese military had gone from seemingly invincible to shattered, unable to keep up with the overwhelming industrial might of the United States. This discovery wasn't just about a single aircraft. It was about the crumbling empire it represented. The Marines, standing there on the shores of Iwo Jima, could see with their own eyes the toll that time and mistakes had taken. The discovery of the Zero's missing armor sent ripples through military analysis for decades to come. It raised questions not only about the plane's design, but also about the broader strategies employed during the war. How many other decisions had been made based on miscalculations? What had the Allies learned from this moment? And perhaps most importantly, what lessons would be passed on to future generations of military strategists and engineers? The absence of armor in the Zero fighter, while a seemingly minor detail, was part of a much larger story. It was a tale of technological innovation, of military doctrine that failed to evolve in time, and of a war that ended not just with a surrender, but with a profound reckoning about the choices made in the heat of battle. February 12, 1945. 0600 hours. Iwo Jima. The Zero fighter, stripped of its armor, remains buried in the sand, a solemn reminder of what happens when a war machine is left vulnerable to the inevitable forces of change. And as the Marines walk away, the question lingers in the air. Could this single oversight have changed the outcome of the Pacific War? Could it have been the difference between victory and defeat? Or was it merely a symbol of a larger, unavoidable collapse? Sergeant Howard takes a deep breath and runs his hand across the exposed belly of the Zero fighter once more. His face hardens, the weight of the discovery settling in. Nearby, a fellow Marine, Private Duncan, picks up a piece of jagged metal from the sand. It looks like a fragment of an old wing. He turns it over in his hand, the reflection of the dull metal catching the morning sun, before tossing it aside. It clinks as it hits the sand, the sound a sharp reminder of the chaos of war that had brought them here. Duncan's voice breaks through the silence. What if we hadn't found this? What if it was still out here, hidden under the sand, forgotten forever? It's a rhetorical question, but it hangs in the air, unanswered. The importance of the discovery, of unveiling the mystery behind this forgotten relic, suddenly feels much larger than just a piece of metal. It's as if they've unearthed something that could rewrite history, or at least offer a glimpse into the psyche of a defeated empire. In the grand scheme of the Pacific Campaign, the discovery of this Zero fighter was just another moment in the brutal conquest of Iwo Jima. But for the Marines who found it, this moment felt significant, like they had uncovered something that had been intentionally hidden from the world. The island had been a strategic point, a stepping stone to Japan itself. Yet this single aircraft, abandoned on the beach, was a symbol of the conflict's larger toll. In the weeks that followed, more Marines would arrive, more battles would be fought, but few would pause to consider the small, overlooked relic that lay on the shore. The absence of armor on the Zero fighter was something that the Japanese military could have easily overlooked in its quest to compete with the technological advancements of the Allies. Yet it was a catastrophic misstep. To an outsider, the idea of a military fighter plane missing its armor might seem trivial. But in war, the smallest vulnerability could mean the difference between life and death. As the Marines pushed forward, they were unaware of how deep this discovery would cut into the understanding of Japanese strategy. It was a stark reminder that the nature of war was never just about brute force. It was about intelligence, foresight, and the ability to adapt to the unexpected. The Japanese Zero fighter's design had been a marvel of its time, dominating the skies in the early years of the Pacific War. Its lightweight design allowed for incredible agility, but it came at the cost of armor and protection. This was not simply a decision of craftsmanship or engineering, but one driven by a profound misunderstanding of the reality of prolonged warfare. The Zero was designed for speed, but that speed ultimately became a double-edged sword. The Japanese Empire, as it entered the final stages of the war, had been fighting with dwindling resources and an increasingly fractured strategy. Despite their best efforts to keep pace with the Allies' technological advancements, they found themselves playing catch-up. The Zero fighter had once been the epitome of military superiority, but by the time the Marines uncovered the abandoned plane, its design flaws were painfully evident. What made this particular discovery so striking was that it wasn't just about the fighter's lack of armor. It was about the broader theme of military failure. The absence of armor represented the culmination of years of poor strategic decisions that had led to the downfall of the once mighty Japanese military. The focus on speed and maneuverability, while effective early on, had left the Zero, and by extension Japan's military, vulnerable to more advanced technologies, from bombers to fighters equipped with superior armament and armor. In a way, the discovery of the Zero's missing armor serves as a tragic metaphor for the broader collapse of the Japanese war effort. It wasn't just about a flaw in a single aircraft's design. It symbolized a larger strategic blind spot. The Japanese had put their faith in one aspect of warfare, agility and speed, and failed to recognize the importance of balance. The irony is that the Zero fighter had been designed to be the ultimate weapon of the skies, yet it was ultimately undone by a lack of foresight. It was like a prize fighter who focuses solely on speed and finesse, only to collapse under the weight of an opponent's sheer strength. The absence of armor was the flaw in the machine, but it was also the flaw in Japan's military thinking, a flaw that would cost them dearly in the final stages of the war. The discovery served as a chilling reminder that, in warfare, no matter how advanced a technology or strategy might seem, it must always be prepared to withstand the unforgiving demands of survival. Japan had put all their chips on the agility of the Zero, but in the end, it was not enough to stand up to the Allied forces, who had long since learned the importance of defense. As the Marines stood back and surveyed the fighter, a profound realization washed over them. This wasn't just an aircraft. This was a symbol of something much larger, the tragic decline of a once great military force. The Zero fighter, so revered by the Japanese, had been reduced to a forgotten relic, abandoned in the sand. And its vulnerability was a testament to the folly of overconfidence in a time of desperate war. Sergeant Howard, who had spent hours inspecting the fighter, stood in front of it, his eyes fixed on the exposed metal. The emotions of the past few hours, the terror of the battle, the exhaustion of the campaign, seemed to drain from him as he stared at the plane. His voice, quiet and filled with a newfound understanding, broke the silence. "They didn't see it coming," he murmured. "They thought they could outpace us. But in the end, it was the fundamentals that did them in." The Marines stood there for a moment, absorbing the weight of his words. They had been part of something much larger than a battle for a remote island. They had witnessed the final stages of an empire's collapse. The Zero, though just one plane among many, represented the tragic end of a war that had once seemed unstoppable, but which had ultimately been undone by small but critical mistakes. The aftershocks of this discovery reverberated far beyond the shores of Iwo Jima. The missing armor of the Zero fighter became a symbol for military strategists, analysts, and historians alike. It raised difficult questions about the nature of warfare, about how even the smallest of oversights could tilt the balance of power in a war that was, by all measures, already tipping in favor of the Allies. The Marines' discovery in the grand scope of history might seem like a footnote, but it was a powerful reminder of the human element in war. Behind every tank, every fighter, every naval fleet, there are human decisions. Decisions that can change the course of history. The Zero's missing armor was more than just a design flaw. It was a choice that embodied a larger narrative of a nation's desperation, its refusal to adapt to the changing tides of war, and ultimately, its downfall. As the Marines continue their examination of the Zero, the atmosphere grows heavier. The morning fog seems to cling to the aircraft, shrouding it in a quiet, eerie stillness. Private Duncan, the younger of the two Marines, runs his hand along the side of the fuselage, his fingers tracing over what's left of the paint. It's a moment of respect, of quiet contemplation. His eyes, though tired and weathered, seem to see beyond the plane, beyond the war. He speaks softly, more to himself than anyone else. I used to think these things were invincible, that they could never fall. But this changes everything." He pauses, his voice trailing off as he looks out toward the horizon, the sounds of gunfire from the distant battle still faintly echoing in the background. In that moment, it's clear. The Zero fighter isn't just an object of war. It's a symbol of the destruction of once unshakable confidence. The Marines' discovery of the Zero fighter was a stark reminder of the shifting tides in the Pacific theater. With the Allies steadily gaining ground, the Japanese had begun to realize they were no longer the undisputed power in the sky. The Zero, once the terror of American pilots, had been defeated by a combination of superior firepower, advanced tactics, and, crucially, better technology. But the lack of armor on the Zero was a deeper commentary on Japan's strategic choices. By this point in the war, Japan's military had already made significant miscalculations. The Zero was a relic of early war strategy, designed with the emphasis on speed and agility, without considering the changes in the battlefield. What made this plane dangerous to the Allies in 1941 was its exceptional maneuverability, but by 1945, the nature of air combat had changed. The ability to take hits, to survive prolonged engagements, had become just as important as speed. The discovery of the Zero on Iwo Jima wasn't just a historical curiosity. It was a glimpse into the mistakes of a nation whose leadership refused to adapt fast enough. Japan's failure to integrate armor into their fighters mirrored a broader failure to recognize that their military was losing the war, and they had been losing it for quite some time. The discovery, though seemingly isolated, opened up a larger discussion on the industrial implications of warfare. During World War II, both the Allies and the Axis powers faced an urgent need for innovation. However, while the Allies were rapidly advancing their technological capabilities, Japan's military was stifled by a lack of resources, which led to a dangerous over-reliance on outdated tactics. The Zero's vulnerability was a product of a broader, systemic issue. The Japanese were unable to sustain their technological advancements in the face of increasing pressure from the Allies. They lacked the manufacturing capabilities and resources to produce aircraft that could match the Allies' planes in both speed and durability. As the war dragged on, Japan's resources were depleted, and their designs were becoming less and less viable. The Zero was a prime example of this. A brilliant plane built on a brilliant idea, but one that could not evolve fast enough to match the changing demands of a protracted war. While the United States was mass-producing advanced aircraft, tanks, and ships, Japan's industry could not keep pace. The absence of armor on the Zero was one such consequence of this lack of adaptability. It was a painful reminder of the limits of innovation when coupled with dwindling resources. There is an undeniable irony in the discovery of the Zero's missing armor. In its prime, the Zero was a weapon of unparalleled agility, designed for one purpose: to dominate the skies. But as the war progressed, Japan's failure to keep pace with technological advancements turned the Zero into a liability. The plane that once represented the pinnacle of Japanese air superiority had become a tragic symbol of military overconfidence and strategic blindness. The truth behind this discovery goes beyond just a design flaw. It represents the limits of human ambition when faced with the brutal reality of war. The Zero was a machine designed to win a battle, but it was not designed to survive the war. It was the perfect tool for quick, early victories, but ultimately could not endure the sustained pressure of a global conflict. The missing armor isn't just a piece of history. It's a stark reminder that every advantage, no matter how seemingly perfect, can become a vulnerability. And for those who fail to recognize their flaws in time, the cost can be devastating. As the Marines gather to prepare for the next phase of their mission, Sergeant Howard takes one final look at the Zero fighter. There's a quiet understanding that this isn't just a discovery. It's a symbol of what happens when nations fail to adapt, when they place too much faith in one aspect of warfare, and when they fail to see the bigger picture. Sergeant Howard speaks to the group, his voice heavy with the weight of the moment. This plane, this was the heart of Japan's aerial might, and now it's nothing more than a rusted relic. If they could have seen the end coming, maybe they would have built it differently. Maybe it would have had armor. Maybe they'd still be fighting. His words hang in the air as the Marines prepare to move on. They're aware, in this fleeting moment, that their discovery is far more significant than just the remnants of an aircraft. It's a reflection of the larger battle they're fighting, not just on Iwo Jima, but across the Pacific. And as they move away from the plane, it's clear. This discovery is a key part of the story that will ultimately shape the course of the war. The impact of this discovery rippled through history. After the war, military analysts, historians, and strategists would revisit the Zero and its design flaws. The plane's lack of armor became a symbol of a larger theme in warfare, that no single aspect of a weapon can ensure victory. It must be balanced with others. Speed with durability, offense with defense, agility with protection. For the United States, the lesson was clear. In the years that followed, they would continue to evolve, pushing the boundaries of military technology to ensure that their planes and tanks could both fight and survive. The Japanese, on the other hand, would face the consequences of their failure to adapt. The Zero, once a symbol of Japan's ingenuity, was now a testament to the cost of technological and strategic stagnation. The absence of armor on the Zero fighter was a critical mistake, one that changed the outcome of many battles, one that symbolized the broader mistakes of Japan during the war. And as the years passed, that lesson remained. A lesson that still resonates today, reminding us that no matter how powerful or fast something may seem, without the proper foundation, it can all fall apart. February 12, 1945. 0600 hours. Iwo Jima. The Zero still rests in the sand, its exposed belly vulnerable to the wind and the elements. The engine, once a symbol of death and destruction, is now silent. And as the Marines walk away, they leave behind more than just the ruins of a plane. They leave behind the lesson that speed and agility alone cannot win a war. Protection, foresight, and adaptability are the true measures of survival, in battle and in life itself. February 12, 1945. 0600 hours. Iwo Jima. The Zero fighter still lies in the sand, its rusted body exposed to the elements, a forgotten relic of a once dominant military force. The absence of its armor, a glaring flaw in its design, now serves as a haunting reminder of the fragility of military superiority. The fog that once concealed its secrets has lifted, leaving behind nothing but the cold, hard truth. As the Marines continue their march, the aircraft remains, its story etched into the landscape. The lesson is clear: no matter how fast, how agile, or how strong something may seem, without the foundation of protection and foresight, it will falter. Japan's Zero fighter, in its quest to be the best, ultimately lost sight of the fundamentals. And with that, lost the war. And so, as the winds of history continue to shift, the once mighty Zero fighter remains, a solemn monument to the mistakes of war, and a lesson that continues to echo in the halls of military strategy today. The sand shifts with the wind, the fog rolls back, and the story of the Zero fighter, vulnerable and exposed, fades into the pages of history. But the lesson, timeless and unyielding, remains.